Good afternoon, everyone.
We're not sure how all those people are going to fit in the teenier room upstairs. It's like, why did they do this, you know? That other room would have been perfect and real comfortable. It's crazy. Got 80 people here.
Father Paul a ride now, if you want. Just give Father Paul a ride. I can
Okay.
give a ride, or I can...
Oh, you're going to drive?
I'm going to drive.
Really? You're going to take...
Again, good afternoon, everyone. We welcome you to session Embracing the Struggles and Blessings of Disabilities. I am Janelle Lavender, and I will be your session chair for this session. Before I introduce you to our presenter, I would like to invite you to a Mass and reception honoring the lives of gifts of persons with disabilities, the deaf community, family, friends, and caregivers. This Mass will be held tonight at 7 p.m. at the Shrine of St. John Newman, St. Peter's Church, 1019 North 5th Street. And we do have some invitations, and they will be handed out after the presentation. Our presenter is Ms. Janice Benton, Executive Director of the National Catholic Partnership on Disability, which guides initiatives that promote participation of persons with disabilities in the Catholic Church. She speaks throughout the United States and as a guest on Catholic radio. She consults with the United States Conference of Catholic Bishops on life and disability issues and spoke at the 2014 Vatican International Symposium on Autism. From that meeting, she was invited to speak in a similar international autism conference in Monterrey, Mexico, this past April. In 2012, Janice received national awards from the Round Table Association of Catholic Diocesan Social Action Directors and the National Fraternity of the Secular Order of the United States. She is a professed secular Franciscan, wife, and mother of 2 adult children. I introduce Ms. Janice Benton.
Good afternoon. Thank you for being here, and thank you for being hearty souls. We're not quite sure why the room changed, but we're glad you're here, and maybe some of the folks from who were upstairs will be coming in. I don't know, but we're really glad to have you here with us. I didn't have a chance to practice this, so I hope it'll work. It doesn't. Can you ask him to check that? Can you ask him to check why it's not advancing? Today, we're going to be talking about several things relating to disability. We're going to look at disability in a new light, hopefully, so faces of disability, insights from our church teaching, but then talking about the struggles and the blessings of disability, as well as embracing new possibilities in parish life. Let's see if I can, they're going to check that, thank you. In terms of the specific outcomes of the talk, and I am going to have, you'll have to bear with me, with the room change, we were consolidated, and now I've got about 40 minutes instead of an hour, so So I'm going to be shifting through a little bit. This priest, who you see signing L, is going to be our homilist for our Mass tonight at 7 o'clock. So if you're able to join us, you'll have the opportunity to meet Father Mike Depsick. He's a wonderful priest from the Archdiocese of Detroit. What I'd like to specifically, I hope you take away from today, are 4 R's. One is, excuse me, respect, and that is realizing each person is unique, made in God's image, and loved by our infinite God. The next is relationship, which is really the bottom line of everything we do in relation to disability. It's about being in community and not about programs. Too often in parish life, you always think about, I got to do this, I got to create a new program. No, you need to be present to people, and that's what we're going to talk about. Sorry, I'm going to get ahead. Okay. And then the third R is responsibility, which is your own. What difference you can make taking ownership of your role in the parish and in family life. And then finally, the resources that are available and what to use. First of all, if we're going to talk about disabilities, I want to just share with you what at NCPD, the National Catholic Partnership on Disability, what we think about as disabilities. And this is my predecessor, Mary Jane Owen's definition. They're the normal, anticipated outcomes of the risks, stresses, and strains of the living process. In other words, they're part of living, and you should be expecting them. They aren't so extraordinary that you don't plan for them, because they are a part, and they touch everybody. They touch people regardless of age or race or culture. As you may well know, 1 person in 5 has some form of disability, which would mean 20% of all Catholics and the folks in your pews and in your parishes. And that isn't even counting some of the folks that our wonderful Cardinal was speaking about, people who are elders and maybe just need certain accommodations for the aging process. You probably have heard, because we hear it all too often, there's nobody with a disability in our parish. If you hear that, please help the person recognize that they're probably wrong. Now, if that really is true, then that means there's a big problem, and people either aren't feeling welcome, they can't get in, they've had a past hurt. And sometimes you might not even recognize the disability because it isn't as evident as some, learning disabilities or some forms of mental illness. But oftentimes it's that they just can't get in, there may not be transportation, so they aren't there. But we're here today to think about how can we make sure they are. So who in our parish or family might have that disability? And, oops, sorry. This picture shows statistic of 1 in 5. This is a wonderful hodgepodge of people that we were able to put together, many of whom are grown now. It's an older picture, and some of whom now have disabilities that didn't have them when they were in the picture, because you acquire disabilities along the way. The little girl right in the center, the beautiful little girl, is now in college studying chemistry. She's, and the one with the blonde hair and the little uniform-looking thing is my daughter, who's been married for 4 years. So, but the point is, in any group, there will be folks with disabilities. You may or may not recognize it, depending on what the disability is, but you need to anticipate it, you need to plan for it, you need to expect it. Same thing with this group. I already mentioned Father Mike. I'm going to talk about the little girl whose little profile you see later. So, this is my goddaughter. I'm going to tell you a little bit about her now, and I'm going to refer back to her later. So, Rose was, one of the issues with disability is threats to the lives that people have. The woman, her mom, is in my secular Franciscan community. She went to the doctor for a routine sonogram, and they found some forms of heart defect and said, schedule your abortion on the way out the door. And that's just happening all the time, day in and day out throughout the country. So of course they did not listen, and Rose was born. The picture of her sitting on her mom's lap is when Pope Benedict came. We just had a beautiful lockdown and celebration with Pope Francis yesterday, but this was in 2008 when we did the same thing with Pope Benedict, and we were on the street waiting to wave at him. And she has since now made her first communion, and she's in school. So part of what we want to think about in relation to folks with disabilities, just as with anyone, is that we're, as the Cardinal said so beautifully, we're all created in the image and likeness of God, every single one of us. This is my daughter that you saw before, and as I mentioned, her wedding, but the reason her picture's here is because she had a Catholic wedding and she had a Mass, and someone questioned her and said, "Why are we having Mass?" And she said, "Because we're Catholic. We're having Mass, we're Catholic." Which made me think about, well, what else is there about being Catholic? And that's really what we're here about in this wonderful Congress and the World Meeting of Families. So here are some lessons that I think are part of who we are as being Catholic. One is, as I just said, each person is made in the image and likeness of God. And our beautiful Pope Francis certainly makes this point over and over and over again, and we're so grateful to him for that. It's rooted in Scripture, and it's rooted in our teachings, the Catechism of the Church, and other teachings, other statements from our bishops. We also know, because we're Catholic, that each person has innate dignity. And I'd like to read a few of these quotes. One is from St. John Paul II. "God has shown us unsurpassably how he loves all human beings and thereby confers upon them an infinite dignity." And then from our own guidelines for the celebration of the sacraments, and you need to know about that document in parish life. It's very important because sometimes folks are told, no, your child can't make First Communion because they have an intellectual disabilities. You need to go to our website and download the guidelines and read them because they're very, very helpful. And the very first paragraph says, "By reason of their baptism, all Catholics are equal in dignity in the sight of God and have the same divine calling." And I love this quote from Pope Benedict. "Because we're Catholic, we know each of us is willed, each of us is loved, each of us is necessary." I hope you'll remember that. It's very, very important to understand it and believe it. Again, and here is our wonderful Pope Francis, who we'll see in a few days. We're very blessed because we had a big celebration with him yesterday, and now we're able to be here in Philadelphia as well to see him and celebrate with him again. But he has been such a gorgeous witness to us of this dignity of every person and seeing God in people. And that's the quote from him about all life being of inestimable value. Even the weakest, the most vulnerable, the sick, the old, the unborn, the poor, are masterpieces of God's creation, made in his image, destined to live forever, and deserving of the utmost reverence and respect. Again, because we are Catholics, we know we all have a responsibility to serve. So that's ourselves, everybody in this room. It's everybody with or without a disability. That's important because too often we think about taking care of people. This isn't about taking care of people. And this section with the Cardinal speaking about all of us being wounded and all of us having wounds. But even with our woundedness and wounds, we all have a responsibility to serve and to call people to service. And we hope that you're doing that. Our bishops, our wonderful U.S. bishops, have given us some very helpful tools to do our ministry or to do our outreach in parishes. And I just encourage you to stop by our booth, which is number 1208, and go to our website, which I'll at the end, ncpd.org, because you can download these documents for free and just have access to them because they're really important to be familiar with in this ministry. And then other documents as well, Go and Make Disciples. Welcome and Justice is in a packet that we have downstairs that you can pick up. Again, just talking about both the pastoral statement, Welcome and Justice says, there can be no separate church for people with disabilities. We are one flock under the care of a single shepherd. And that's really important to bear in mind as well. The National Directory for Catechesis, I think I'm getting ahead of myself, but says everyone is an agent of catechesis. Everyone has a responsibility to evangelize. Here are some quotes from our pastoral, the one that I just said to you. Another one that's really good is, people with disabilities are not looking for pity. Again, that's often the response you get, and that's not what people need. They seek to serve the community and enjoy their full baptismal rights as members in the church. And from the sacramental guidelines as well. Since we're an international meeting, I wanted to share a document from the Latin American bishops, the Parishioners document, where they said, all human beings exist purely and simply by the love of God who created them and by the love of God who preserves them every moment. The Lord is author and master of life, and human beings, his living image, are always sacred, from their conception at all stages of existence until their natural death and after death. The Christian view of human beings makes apparent their value, which transcends the entire universe. That's the beauty of our church and our faith, is that we have these beautiful teachings and truths that we can recognize and appreciate everybody. Important thing in this statement is the recognition of from conception to the end of life. And I'm going to talk a little bit later about the threats to people with disabilities. Here's from the Directory on Catechesis about being the agents. So they gave me the title of my talk, which was good because it gave me a lot of something to really ponder about. What are some of the struggles of disability that people are facing? And we were going to take a little bit of time, but now that my time is cut short, I won't leave you time to talk with your neighbor about it, but I encourage you to think about, when you go, what might be some of those struggles of disability, and then what can we in turn do to help alleviate some of those struggles. My assumption is when you think about struggles of disability, it's what a person themselves are facing. We were just in this lockdown to see Pope Francis yesterday, and we had these beautiful families who came, one from Miami, drove all the way just to have this chance to be blessed by the Holy Father, and others came from around the DC area. And so I asked a few of them, well, what are your struggles? And they, they did say, day to day, you're having to deal with a lot. But the biggest struggle people face are the attitudes of other people, and the indifference, and the intolerance of people, or the stares that they might give. So when you're thinking about what struggles, what are some of the struggles and how you can alleviate them, think about what your actions might do to be making people feel uncomfortable or unwelcome. This is from our pastoral statement of 78. And it talks about prejudice. This is really helpful, I think. Starts with the simple perception of difference. Even if we don't look down upon them, we tend all too often to think of them as somehow a part, not completely one of us. And that's part of that struggle, is feeling separated and not part of the community of faith. And another important thing, if we had longer time together, is that disability, it's important to realize disability is a part of who you are, but it's not the definition of who you are. It doesn't define your whole being. And too often we just kind of see a person and make judgments about them and believe that that's the totality of who they are, and it's certainly not the case. I mentioned earlier with Rose, my goddaughter, about the life-threatening struggle, and you can do a lot to help with this, because people from the time, as with Rose's mom, get that at a routine sonogram, get that diagnosis of a disability. You probably know this, but maybe you don't, that in 80 to 90% of the cases, the baby is aborted, which means that's Catholic parents too, because we're a big part of the, the community in this country. So, the doctors, for whatever reason, are so, not insistent, but they're so persistent in really suggesting and making people think that that really is your best option to do. So that's a problem. Then you're coming across healthcare rationing and decisions based on money as to what kind of care you can get. we're facing and we fight in our office against policies that are changing organ donation policies. And it's on both ends of the spectrum. On one end, people with disabilities are sometimes not given organs based on the fact that they have a disability, and they think the quality of their life is less. On the other hand, they were trying to change policies to increase the bank of from where they can get organs, and they thought that people who are ventilator dependent and significantly disabled and don't have a real big, in their judgment, quality of life, maybe they could be encouraged to be organ donors, which would actually end their lives. So they were increasing their pool by looking at the folks with significant disabilities, ventilator dependent. So we are under threat. And of course, with assisted suicide, I'm sorry, I think it has been addressed well, you all are from all over the country and the world, but it was introduced in 20 states this year. We've been battling attempts to legalize assisted suicide in 20 states, and we're still battling it in DC, where I'm from. We did win in a lot of places, but every year it's getting reintroduced, and it's a huge threat to people with disabilities. Other struggles, some of which I've already spoken about, and these were, I think, if we'd have had a chance to talk about them, we'd have come up with them. I was going to have you talk and then just shout out what you came up with as some of them. I'm assuming some of these might be what you would have thought about: barriers, steps, stairs, frowns. Attitude. Attitude is the big piece, attitudes of others. But also, we have no program. I feel like a burden. The stigma of especially mental illness. Sometimes, and this happens more often than you want to ever dream, this one where it says, "You must leave, you're a disturbance." I don't know if any of you are ushers, but I hope that in your parish you have some good training that helps people know not to come and say, "Please just leave, you're really being a problem." Because when you make the person with a disability feel unwelcomed, then you're losing not only the person but the whole family with it. And the no friends is huge. It's very huge, and you hear that from parents a lot. You know, there's good programs, they're really trying, but there's no friends. My child has no friends. And so relationships, we really, really need to work on relationships. So then we need to think about, well, what are some of the blessings? If we've been thinking about all these struggles, what are some of these blessings of disability? And again, I'd like you to just ponder those and think about what you think of it. And we were going to write them down, but we won't. But what we want to think about is the person themselves, and we already heard that everybody has dignity, everybody's called to service. So these are just some wonderful pictures of some people who are serving the church. And if you come to our Mass tonight, you'll experience that. Our homilist, as I said, is Father Mike Depsick, a deaf priest. But you see Father Mike Eswine in the center in the black and white picture. He was a deacon who was in a car accident and ended up paralyzed. His parish loved him, and they ended up, creating beautiful access for him. And the bishop, who had a lot of foresight, praise God, ordained him. And he has been at least in 3 parishes now. He's in the Archdiocese of St. Louis, and everywhere he's going, he's making these parishes accessible. And he and his father, I think, helped create this. But you see, you can't quite tell from that picture. It's a beautiful sweeping ramp. But what they did was, in the altar, he wheels up to a little ledge, and he pushes a button, and it raises him so he's at the right level to serve. And now, we just gave an award to a parish in the Archdiocese of Atlanta last year that you push a button, and the whole altar raises and lowers. I never saw anything like it. It was unbelievable. This picture of the young woman in the woman in the yellow T-shirt and the young man, he was supposed to be here. Please pray for him. He's the son of my coworker, Nancy. His name is Larry. Wonderful man, oldest living person with his disability. He's in his late 40s now, has had 50-plus surgeries, very persistent, wonderful mother who just, makes sure tiger, she's just like a mama bear like no other, making sure he has what he needs. But right now, his health, they couldn't travel from Iowa. But as you can see, he's a Eucharistic minister, and he loves that role. And when they were in Iowa, they're in Davenport now, but when they were in Dubuque, the Archbishop there loved him to serve his masses even. It was wonderful. But what's significant about this picture is Colleen Rupert in the yellow t-shirt from my Archdiocese of DC was the first person we ever knew with Down syndrome who was a Eucharistic minister. And that was 20 plus years ago. And she was really a groundbreaker. What I love about that is that there's Larry, the next generation, serving her as a Eucharistic minister. But you see, and this, the red picture, I always call it the red one, but that's actually from a Mass here in the Archdiocese of Philadelphia where a person who's blind is being the lector with Braille. And the other picture is, again, from 2008. Well, hopefully we'll have new ones from the visit of Pope Francis, but that is when we were in National Stadium. We were the first event in National Stadium. They struck the last nail in, I think, the morning of that Mass, but because it was just being built. But I was privileged to be with a group of 4 people with disabilities who were the altar bearers and the gift bearers, and we brought it up to the altar. And the young man who's seated, but his name is James, he told us, I'm not Jimmy, I'm James, and has Down syndrome, specifically selected because the Pope Benedict, you know, he had a cousin who was killed in the Holocaust because he had Down syndrome. So we thought that would be good for him to see James. And he was the one selected to do the patent. So we all came up, and he just raced up those stairs to give it to. And then Pope Benedict came down because everybody else had gone up, but he came down because Colleen was in a wheelchair and the young girl in pink, and couldn't get up. So service. Obviously we serve, and here are more examples of that. The blessing of belonging. And we have a beautiful, if you come by our booth, you can look at a 5-minute video of the young girl in the white who was waving. And if you happen to watch ABC News last night, she was at our lockdown, and she's in purple too. She was in our lockdown, and she was interviewed, and so she was on national news last night. Very articulate, beautiful young girl. She's a graduate of a Catholic all-girls high school. She has Down syndrome. Graduate of a Catholic all-girls high school. Works in a law office now. But she talks about, you know, what it means to belong. And her video is called A Life Like Yours. We showed it you can see all the people in the background I don't know, some of you may have been at the Youth Rally for Life every January's in DC, where 18 now, it keeps getting bigger every year, but 18,000 people are in this huge stadium. And we showed that 5-minute video, and then she came out and was introduced and led us in the rosary. And this man, Tom Draper, beautiful man, intellectual disability, had a little bit of a physical disability, an arm that was kind of like this, but it never stopped him from hugging, and everybody who knew him loved him dearly. He has since gone on to the Lord, but they have a dear sense of belonging, but not everybody with a disability does by any means. And one thing we've started to talk about, because you often hear about inclusion, but I want you to ponder when you leave, think about the difference between inclusion and belonging, because we really want you to think about belonging almost now, more so than inclusion even. Because inclusion, they're still giving me the power to let you in, but belonging is recognizing that you belong just by virtue of who you are, a child of God, baptized in the church. You belong. So that changes how you think about the place of folks with disabilities in our parish life, because you recognize they're already we're all part of parish life. So it's not a matter of starting a special program so somebody can come in and be part of us. This is the little girl I said I'd come back to. And this is where we get to the belonging. This is a dear friend of mine from the Archdiocese of Washington who now is responsible for this ministry. She's in that office. But she didn't know about the pastoral statement until she went to a meeting in her parish. And she learned about the pastoral. Again, I encourage you to read it. It's from '78. You think it's too old, it's irrelevant. It's not. It's amazing. And, but what she says after she learned about the pastoral, she said, before the pastoral, the pastoral statement of U.S. Catholic bishops on people with disabilities, 1978. I thought our church offered our family only 3 B's: baptism, burial, and back of the church seating. But after reading the pastoral, I understood the church also offered my daughter and our family belonging. And that's what's important. This little girl is beautiful. She's in her 20s now. She's partially hearing, blind, and kind of autistic. Just beautiful, though. So now I wanted to think about, so what does this all mean in terms of our parish life? What's the importance when we're all coming from parishes? What difference can we make in the parish life? So from the catechism, so we'll start with the catechism, and this is a cool picture. This is, I don't know if you've ever known people who are deaf-blind, but this is a person tactily interpreting. And often, at least in our community, in the Deaf Center, it's very beautiful to see the deaf members of the community, you know, watching the interpreter and then signing for the deaf-blind members. So it's a real way that they're serving one another. But from the just in terms of thinking about the importance of parish life, so why do we need to make sure people with disabilities are really integrally part of our parish life? Parish is a place where all the faithful can be gathered together for Sunday celebration of the Eucharist. Parish initiates the Christian people into the ordinary expression of liturgical life. It gathers them, it teaches Christ's saving doctrine, it practices the charity of the Lord. One thing, we have a diocesan disability director in the Archdiocese in Newark. I don't know if anybody's from here, but her name is Ann Masters, and she's really a leader in our ministry, and she's very insightful because we do spend, and I'm glad increasingly we spend more time thinking about, are we sure our religious ed programs are well meeting the needs of people with a range of disabilities. But she says, well, that's very, very important. It's important to prepare people for the sacraments, but if they're not going to Mass, how are they going to avail themselves of the sacraments? So it's really important to do going to Mass, and that's part of this. Parish life means making sure people are really a part of this daily. And here's from our pastoral statement. For most Catholics, the community of believers is embodied in the local parish. The parish is the door to participation for people with disabilities, and it's a responsibility of the pastor and lay leaders to make sure this door is always open. If the participation of people with disabilities and their families is to be real and meaningful, the parish must prepare itself to receive them. And that's your homework to go home with and to make sure that's happening. Now in Spe Salve, and this was Pope Benedict, he said, in terms of thinking about communal salvation, and again, why is the parish life so important? This real life towards which we try to reach out again and again is linked to a lived union with people. And for each individual, it can only be attained within this we. And that's important because are we separating people? Are we saying to parents, okay, your child's got autism. We really don't have a program here, but here's our religious ed text. Go ahead and just homeschool. Are we saying that? Are we doing a separate program on a night and not really making sure that the child with a disability is in the program with other kids with disabilities? Are there ways to be integrated? So we need to really think about this we and what Pope Benedict meant by we. It doesn't mean everybody but that child who's disruptive in Mass that the usher says, please leave. It doesn't mean the young girl with CP, severe cerebral palsy, who might drool and make you feel uncomfortable. It doesn't mean a homeless man with mental illness. Is that our problem? Are we including those kind of folks in that we? Ponder that, please, with your homework and consider, does your parish really have a we? This is from this Congress, and I think it's important to read it. I hope you had a chance to read the little book. It's really beautiful, all the different sessions with it, but this was one that I thought especially touched what we're about here in this session, being in community with one another. There is no substitute for ordinary parishioners simply befriending and serving one another. How lay people treat each other will determine whether a parish is fulfilling its mission in this way. We were made for one another, and to live as if that is not true is a sadness, a failure to fulfill the life-giving law of Christ. And I think Cardinal said it in his keynote right before me. You know, we're about being in relationship and being present to one another. So now, what's your role in it? Do you have a role? Absolutely. And this family is from Philadelphia, too. You might bump into them here. Your own attitude and spirit will make all the difference. Again, we talked about attitude as a stumbling block often because of the way bad attitudes, but a good attitude can make the difference. If the pastor or the DRE or the parish principal has that spirit of recognizing that people belongs, you can do everything. I got a friend who says, how did she say it? You say yes, and the rest is details. The rest is in the details. You just figure it out because you have that spirit and recognition of belonging. Again, if we recognize and believe that everybody belongs at the table of the Lord, then you figure out how it can happen, and you have community. I love this picture. This, again, is James and the young girl. But this is a disability advocate, and for life of me, when I wrote this down, I don't remember who said it, but this is back to that pastoral statement. When I read the pastoral nearly 30 years ago, it represented for me the church as I always hoped it would be, and God's deepest hope for his people. And I think when you embrace this, what I'm trying to talk about, and what I hope you take away today, I think it is what we're called to be as church, in relationship with one another, present to one another, caring for one another, and recognizing people's gifts and calling them forward, not just taking care of, but calling forward. This is years and years ago, we had a volume called Opening Doors. This was on the back of it. It's just a little poem that I liked a lot. They drew a circle that shut me out. Heretic, rebel, a thing to flout. So again, thinking about how are we shutting people out? Are we doing that, and what can we do about it? But Love and I had the wit to win. We drew a circle that took them in and recognized they already belonged there, so let's make sure there's a way that they feel that. So again, we were going to ponder this, but who are some of the folks who are missing? And I already talked about some, but these might be more that you hadn't thought about. A young man who's recently released from prison. And my friend, Father Matthew Palkowski's here, interviewed on Catholic radio this morning. It was beautiful, and the Holy Father will visit his jail. But think about, you probably have programs for helping people who are returning from prison. Is your parish doing that? The elderly couple who can't drive, is there transportation? A woman who uses the electric wheelchair but can't get in because of steps. I was surprised. One of the moms I asked, what is the struggle? She still said physical access of her building. I thought we were way beyond that after all these years, but it's still a problem. A couple whose child with autism is disruptive. What are we doing about helping the family find ways to still make sure that child can be part of the community? A person who is hurt and insulted. That is so often the case, that someone has not been back for years because somebody told them a long time ago, your child's not welcome. Well, maybe you need to make that extra effort to say, we're sorry, could you please come back? Well, there's efforts now, of course, that Coming Home campaign. It should really be addressed as well to families who have members with disabilities. Deaf person. We're blessed here with interpreters. We will tonight at our Mass, but not every parish and not even every diocese make sure that people who are deaf have access to sign language. Chemical sensitivity, that's something we often overlook. I'm just going to kind of flip through these because of time. So this is just a quick story. Years ago, I was invited to, he's no longer there, but Father John Ensler, who's now the head of Catholic Charities in the Archdiocese of DC, and hosted Pope Francis there for lunch with some homeless people that Catholic Charities serves today. Father Ensler was a pastor of a parish, and one of the best parishes in our archdiocese in terms of access and really creating a welcoming situation and recognizing people belonged. But he still had me come to talk to everybody in his staff, everybody, the gardener, every single person who was an important part of that parish council person. So we're in a room and we're talking like this. And then I said, any questions? And his assistant raised his hand and said, yeah, I don't get it. Why are we, you yourself said we're the best parish in the diocese, so why are we having to be here listening to you? So I'm like, oh, okay. So I thought, and I said, well, Father Ensler, you haven't said anything. Why do you have me here? And he pondered and he said, because I want people to hear yes. I don't want anybody who comes to this parish to hear no. And I really loved that and really appreciated it. And I think all of us need to think about, you need to make sure people hear yes. That's one of the most painful calls we ever get, is when moms call and say, I tried at my parish, and they just say there's no program and we can't accommodate your child. It's heartbreaking. There's a lot of issues over the lifespan of people, and that's something to ponder, because needs are going to vary even for an individual, and that might be something you might think, I got the best program possible and everybody's going to love it, and then some family comes and says, I know that doesn't really fit the needs of my child, either because of the child's disability, or we really want them to be more engaged with, we don't want a separate program or whatever, and then you say, oh my gosh, we had it all figured out and now you're trying to be picky. You have to recognize you're meeting the needs of individuals. And so you have to be willing to be flexible and open to what individual needs are. And they're going to vary. Nancy, my coworker with Larry, whose picture I showed you, who is the Eucharistic minister, life changes, all of us. Think about how things have changed along the way. And what you needed 5 years ago isn't necessarily what you need now, or what you're interested in now, or how you can best serve now. So be flexible and open to that change. So these are just some thoughts about, in the beginning years, what are families facing, and what are some of the things you might need to think about? Prenatal diagnosis, baptism as a celebration. I mean, how often do you hear, oh somebody was born with a disability, and then it's like, I don't know what to do about this. And instead of making it a celebration, a parish celebration, as every baptism should be, the family gets a very different message. So celebrate the birth of this child. Early on, you might have a diagnosis of disability that wasn't there at birth, but maybe autism at age 2 or 3. Faith, you're dealing with faith formation, preparing for sacraments, hopefully access to your parish school if you have one, and then what the burdens or struggles that some families will have with added responsibilities and expenses. Then you get into these teen years, and this was from an award-winning PowerPoint. We gave an award to this, and it was a beautiful little slideshow, but it's like, okay, which of the kids in that youth group even has a disability? It's kind of hard to tell, but are young people with disabilities part of your youth group? Dealing with sex education and sexual abuse, dating and marriage issues. And then, of course, and it's really important, and our office does really deal with this well now, Janelle, who introduced me, is on our Council on Mental Illness, recognizing that youth, that age when they're going off to college, is often a time young people are coming back with a diagnosis of a significant mental illness and suicide. Suicide, very important to deal with. And then the transition time when they're out of school, my friend Peg, with Kate, her daughter, things were pretty good. She was in a residential school, and then she aged out, and now what? And it almost impacted her ability to work, even because of trying to find the right program for Kate. So that really is a big time of stress for families. And then for the individual themselves, searching for work opportunities, divorce, among families, you know, among couples who are raising kids with disabilities. And then the late onset of disability and what people are facing and coping with that change in their lives. My coworker, again, she's just facing some issues right now that we didn't anticipate, and she's like, it's new. You have to learn how to go through it, but you got to be community together to walk with people as they might be acquiring a disability, Parkinson's or ALS or any other kind of thing, or having had an accident or, you know, losing mobility. Helping people to make sure they still feel part of that parish. And then the life issues we talked about, you know, a little bit in terms of now the threat of assisted suicide, but also, you know, just making wise decisions for end-of-life directives that are compatible with our Catholic faith, which we're so blessed with our teaching that gives us such helpful guidance and direction. I talked about you needing, one of our R's was resources. I just encourage you to use us and stop by the booth because we do have a lot and we love to meet people. We answer our phone. We don't have one of those voicemail things. We say hello and really try to help and direct people to the dioceses. We have, in most dioceses, there's some person who's been given the responsibility of meeting the needs of supporting parishes and meeting the needs of folks with disabilities, so we try to direct you to those folks, but if there's not a good person in your diocese, we really try to provide the resources that you need. So check us out, please. This again was our Pope Benedict lockdown. They were not with us yesterday because you might have seen them on NBC News last night. Rick is a former treasurer, board member of our office. His beautiful daughter, Mary Farrell. They were part of the papal nuncio visit yesterday, if you saw that on the news. And Pope Francis was greeting like all these kids with disabilities and others. And they went right over to, he went right over to Mary Farrell and gave her a kiss. And we're like, oh my goodness, oh my goodness. So that was beautiful. But my encouragement to you is to act on the vision, to read the pastoral and then act on its vision, which is to affirm people as best you can, to act, ACT. Challenge your own self to ongoing growth and introspection, and then fostering a sense of belonging in your parish. I want to end, because I still have 2 minutes. One of the moms who was there yesterday was a woman named, well, I'll just say, the Martinez family came to us from Miami. What we did yesterday was we were locked down in my building, which is directly across the street from the Basilica, for 6 hours, so we could go stand on the street and wave at Pope Francis, and we prayed that he would look our way, and praise God he did. But it was a fun day, and we met people. We had about 50 of us. It was a beautiful day. We were escorted in by the Secret Service, and we had a beautiful mass with some vocation directors from around the country. Father Mike Jolie, who's a blind priest, concelebrated that Mass, and with the Holy Father. You might have seen him on TV. So that was, again, serving, people serving. But we had the local Channel 9 News with us. And they were there all day, locked in too, doing stories and interviews with different families. And the Martinez family had come all the way. They had a son, 11-year-old son named Simon. He had incurred a brain injury at age 6. So now he uses a wheelchair, doesn't speak, can't eat, uses a feeding tube. Beautiful. I wish I could have had a way to show you these pictures because they're gorgeous. But beautiful family. They wanted so badly for the Holy Father to bless their boy. And so they came, they were in lockdown, we went out, the interview. So and we were also on Channel 7 National News, as I said. Well, Channel 9, the reporter, it was interesting because she was like, I'm not Catholic, I don't understand, what is it you want from today? And she said, we would love to have our Holy Father bless us, bless our family, bless my little boy. And she said, well, I'm not Catholic, what do you mean by a blessing? What do you mean by blessing? And she said, well, he's a vicar of Christ. We believe he's, representing Christ, and it would just mean a lot to us to have. And so this reporter persisted, could you just explain a little bit more what a blessing would mean to you from the Holy Father? And she said, well, for me, it would be like being kissed by Jesus, by receiving a kiss from Jesus. And that's my challenge to you, is whether we can be that kind of blessing for people in our parishes and our families, everybody we know, to be like Jesus kissing the person. So thank you very much. I'm glad. 30 seconds, I did it. So I appreciate that you were here with us. And come to our Mass if you can. We would love to have you come to our Mass, 7 o'clock tonight, and it's a beautiful shrine. Yes, please. Oh, 1208. Our booth is 1208. I think it's in Hall C. I haven't been there yet, but anything else? Thank you for coming. I appreciate it.